The last whispers of humanity's once great empire echoed across the vastness of space, fading into the cold silence of the universe. Earth, once a thriving cradle of civilization, had long since been swallowed by the dark tide of war, conquest, and betrayal. The alien invaders, an alliance of ruthless species from distant stars, had swept through the galaxy, crushing all in their path. Nations fell, cities turned to ash, and humanity's spirit was nearly extinguished. Yet, as Earth's last days neared, a single spark of resistance remained. Captain Orion Ward, the last surviving member of the famed human warrior order, stood on the ruins of what was once the United Nations headquarters in New York. He was a solitary figure, draped in a battle-worn uniform adorned with the insignia of humanity's ancient military. The city around him was nothing but twisted metal, shattered glass, and the echoes of a lost civilization. The fires of destruction still burned in the distance, casting a sickly glow over the landscape. He had fought alongside his comrades, heroes of legend, but now they were gone. Earth had fallen, and the last of the human fleets had been scattered to the winds, destroyed by the overwhelming forces of the invaders. Orion, however, refused to surrender. A deep, burning anger filled his chest as he clutched the hilt of his energy sword, a relic passed down through generations of warriors. It was the only weapon he had left from the old world, and it symbolized everything that humanity had once been. As the Empire of the Nexus, an alliance of the most powerful alien species, rampaged across the galaxy, humanity's defiance had become nothing more than a symbol of a doomed resistance. The invaders believed they had crushed every last hope of rebellion. Yet, deep in the heart of the Empire, the name Ward was whispered in hushed tones, a name synonymous with courage, honor, and vengeance. But Orion Ward had no intention of being just a name in a forgotten history. His story, his fight, was far from over. In the war room of the Nexus Empire's flagship, high above the remains of Earth, Grand Empress Tarixa surveyed the galaxy. A massive map of stars stretched out before her, illuminated by the soft blue glow of the holographic projection. The galaxy was hers, every star, every planet, every species. Her empire was vast, and her forces were unstoppable. Yet one threat still loomed over her reign: the last human warrior, Orion Ward. Tarixa's eyes narrowed as she scrolled through the intelligence reports. Ward had evaded capture time and time again, fighting in the shadows, taking down high-ranking Nexus officers and sabotaging critical installations. The humans had been extinguished, yes, but Ward, it seemed, was impossible to kill. "Send out the hunter," Tarixa ordered, her voice cold and unyielding. The hunter was a legendary mercenary, known across the galaxy for his ruthless efficiency. If anyone could eliminate Ward, it was him. Orion's eyes were fixed on the horizon, his mind racing as he processed the enormity of what had just happened. Earth had been lost. The human race was no longer a force to be reckoned with, but that didn't mean it was over. Humanity's greatest weapon was not in its fleets or armies. It was in its warriors, its resilience. Orion had seen the Empire's power firsthand, and he knew they would stop at nothing to crush any flicker of resistance. But humanity had always been at its best when cornered. He turned away from the city and began walking toward the ruins of an old spaceport. The remnants of an ancient vessel, a warship from the early days of the Galactic Wars, lay in the overgrown hangar. The ship, dubbed the Vigilant, had been a symbol of humanity's strength. It had been lost in a failed battle decades ago, but if there was any hope of survival, the Vigilant would be it. Orion knew what he had to do. He wasn't alone. There were others out there, hidden in the far reaches of the galaxy, who still held the fire of humanity's spirit. He would find them, and together they would strike back. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined city. Orion Ward stepped onto the remains of the Vigilant S hull, the cold metal beneath his boots familiar despite the years of neglect. The ship still hummed with the faint echo of long-forgotten power, a beacon of hope in a galaxy ruled by fear. The war was far from over. And Orion Ward would make sure that the Nexus Empire learned the price of underestimating humanity. Orion Ward paced across the desolate hangar, the once grand spaceport now abandoned and forgotten by all but the few who dare to search for remnants of humanity's lost legacy. The Vigilant, its sleek hull covered in decades of dust and debris, loomed before him. It was not just a ship, it was a symbol of all that humanity had fought for, a relic of a time when Earth's fleet still commanded respect across the galaxy. Orion had spent years searching for it, and now, standing in front of its rusted frame, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. His fingers brushed the control panel, and with a soft beep, the ship's systems powered up. Flickering lights illuminated the surrounding walls as the ancient vessel groaned to life, the hum of its engines beginning to reverberate through the ground. Orion's heart raced, knowing this was no ordinary ship. It was a warship built for one thing: victory. The cockpit opened with a hiss, revealing the interior, still intact despite years of abandonment. With a steady hand, Orion climbed into the pilot's seat, his body fitting into it as if he had never left. The controls responded to his touch, an immediate familiarity flooding his mind. The Vigilant had been the pride of Earth's military, and its systems, though old, were still sophisticated. He could feel the pulse of the ship's engines through his fingertips as the controls began to respond to his commands. "Now, let's see if we can still make this old girl fly," Orion muttered to himself. He initiated the thrusters, and with a jolt, the Vigilant rose off the ground, leaving the ruins of the Earth's surface behind. For the first time in months, Orion allowed himself a moment of relief. This was it, the beginning of something bigger. He wasn't alone in this fight. The universe was vast, and there were still pockets of humanity out there, survivors who had hidden in the shadows of the Nexus Empire's conquest. Orion knew that finding them was his next mission, but he also understood that the Vigilant-S systems were not enough. They had to be repaired, upgraded, and reinforced if they stood any chance of surviving the upcoming battles. The Nexus Empire wouldn't just send armies, they would send their finest mercenaries, the hunter among them. Orion set a course for the farthest reaches of the galaxy, to a planet known only to a select few, the hidden world of the last holdouts. It was a place where human refugees had gathered, surviving in secrecy, always evading the ever-watchful eyes of the Nexus. The coordinates had been passed down through whispers and legends, a place where Earth's best could regroup, recover, and plan their next moves. It was there that Orion would find the last remnants of humanity's might, the last warriors willing to fight. Far across the galaxy, in the shadowy depths of the Nexus Empire's capital, Grand Empress Tyrixa stood in the heart of her war room, her fingers trailing across the holographic projection of the Vigilant-S flight path. The ship was moving, slipping through the vast network of Nexus patrols with eerie precision. Tyrixa had expected the last human warrior to stay hidden, but instead, he had emerged from the depths of Earth's ruin like a specter. Her agents reported that Orion Ward had activated the ship, the very ship that had once been the pride of humanity. "We must act quickly," Tyrixa ordered. "The hunter will be dispatched immediately. Ward will not escape this time." The hunter, a fearsome figure in his own right, was renowned for his ability to track and eliminate his targets, no matter how elusive. Tyrixa knew that if anyone could stop Orion Ward, it was the hunter. But she also knew the danger of underestimating humanity. The Nexus Empire had made that mistake once before, and it had cost them dearly. She would not make the same error twice. Orion's journey was perilous, but with the Vigilant now in motion, he felt an undeniable sense of determination. The ship was his lifeline, and the lives of those scattered human refugees across the galaxy depended on him. Every moment spent in space brought him closer to the last holdouts, and the hope of reuniting with his brothers and sisters in arms. The stars outside the viewport blurred as he entered hyperspace, the vast distances between him and the Nexus forces shrinking with each passing second. But just as quickly, a dark presence flickered on his sensors, a ship lurking in the shadows of the galaxy, just outside of his detection range. Orion's hand tightened on the controls. He had been hunted before, but this was different. This was a feeling that ran deeper, a sense that his every move was being watched. The hunter was closing in. Orion Ward's eyes narrowed as the blip on his sensors grew stronger. The hunter was here. His every instinct screamed that something was wrong, too wrong. He had lived through many battles, outwitting enemies far larger and more powerful than any single human could dream of. But the presence now trailing him wasn't like the others. The hunter was a different breed of predator. Silent, patient, ruthless. He had underestimated the Nexus before, but that would be a mistake he wouldn't make again. Orion quickly adjusted the Vigilant S flight path, weaving through the dense asteroid belt ahead. He knew that every second counted. The ship's old shields flickered but held firm as the asteroids pummeled the vessel's hull. He needed time to reach the last holdouts, time to warn the survivors, and time to figure out just what kind of threat the hunter truly posed. The pursuit was relentless. Through the asteroid field, the Vigilant darted and spun with surprising agility for its age. But no matter how fast Orion pushed the ship, the hunter's presence was always there, close, never fading, like a shadow on his tail. His hand hovered over the weapon systems, but he knew better than to engage too early. The hunter wasn't an ordinary bounty hunter. He was an elite operative of the Nexus Empire, trained to track and kill even the most skilled warriors. Orion's mind raced, recalling everything he knew about the hunter. His name was Azric. He was not only a master tracker, but he also possessed a terrifying ability, a cybernetic enhancement that allowed him to predict his target's actions with alarming precision. It was a gift or curse, depending on who you asked. But for someone like Orion, it meant that the hunter could anticipate his every move. Still, even Azric had limits. Orion wasn't just any target. He was humanity's last warrior, and he would not be an easy kill. Back in the dark reaches of space, the hunter was closing in. Azric's ship, sleek and menacing, cut through the void with the elegance of a predator in pursuit. His eyes, augmented by neural interfaces, focused on the readouts flashing across his cockpit. The human warrior had gone to great lengths to evade detection, but every move he made was anticipated, analyzed, and mapped. The hunter's enhancements allowed him to stay one step ahead of his prey, no matter how cunning or resourceful they might be. A voice crackled in his ear, the cold command of Grand Empress Tarixa. "Report, Azric." His lips curled into a smirk. "The target is within range. He won't escape. I have calculated his trajectory. He's heading to the last holdouts, human scum hiding in the deepest shadows. It's a foolish move, but it will make the kill all the more satisfying." Tarixa's voice was flat, but there was a note of cold satisfaction. "Ensure his death is quick. Do not underestimate him, Azric. The human warrior has a habit of surviving against impossible odds." Azric chuckled darkly, adjusting his ship's sensors to lock onto the Vigilant S weak points. "I don't underestimate him. I simply enjoy the hunt." Orion's pulse quickened as the minutes ticked by, the distance between him and his pursuer shrinking with every passing second. Sweat beaded on his brow as his hands danced across the console, trying to throw Azric off his trail. But the hunter was too skilled. Every maneuver Orion made was already predicted. The asteroid field was almost behind them, and the last holdouts were still a few hyperspace jumps away. The thought of the survivors waiting for him kept him going, but a growing sense of dread gnawed at his resolve. Then something in his gut shifted. A flicker of movement on his sensors, too subtle to be real, but sharp enough to ignite his survival instinct. Orion slammed his fist against the controls, sending the Vigilant into a wild barrel roll. A burst of plasma fire seared past him, grazing the ship's shield but missing the vital systems. "He's right on me," Orion muttered under his breath, gritting his teeth. His hands tightened on the steering, forcing the ship into another evasive maneuver, but this time, Azric didn't follow. Orion didn't have time to wonder why. His focus was on the display, where the last few seconds of the asteroid field ticked away. Once he cleared it, there would be no more cover. No more tricks to play. His only advantage was the Vigilant S speed and his own cunning. He set a course for the nearest jump point, a small and uncharted system on the far edge of the galaxy. It wasn't a perfect choice, but it was his best shot at evading the hunter and buying himself enough time to regroup. "Come on, old girl," Orion muttered as he punched in the coordinates. "Let's get out of here." Azric cursed under his breath as the Vigilant darted toward the jump point. He had miscalculated. His neural enhancements had been able to predict Orion's moves, but the human had outsmarted him. For now, he wasn't worried. He knew he would catch up. The hunt was never over. Orion's heart raced as the Vigilant shot toward the jump point, the stars stretching into lines as they entered hyperspace. For a moment, the ship's interior was bathed in the glow of blue light, and Orion allowed himself a fleeting breath of relief. He had escaped. For now. But in the back of his mind, the knowledge gnawed at him. Azric wasn't just a hunter. He was a force of nature, and he wouldn't stop until Orion was dead. And time was running out. The stars blurred into streaks of blue light as the Vigilant tore through hyperspace, escaping the immediate threat of Azric's relentless pursuit. But Orion Ward knew that this momentary victory was just that, momentary. He had bought himself time, but time was something he was rapidly running out of. Orion's mind raced as he reviewed his options. The coordinates he'd entered would bring him to the edge of a remote system, an ancient, forgotten sector known as the Abyssal Depths. The system was barely charted and devoid of any real strategic importance. It was the kind of place the Nexus Empire would overlook, a perfect refuge for survivors who had learned to stay hidden. But there was a catch. No one who entered the Abyssal Depths ever truly returned. The system was surrounded by a dense field of dark matter anomalies, black holes, and gravitational distortions that made navigation a nightmare. Even the Vigilant, with its advanced systems, could easily get lost in its heart. And yet, this was the place that could provide the best chance for survival. If anyone could find a way to navigate the Abyssal Depths, it was Orion. As the ship hummed along the course, a familiar voice crackled over his comm system, distorted but unmistakable. It was a signal from the last holdouts. A low, gravelly voice spoke through the static. "Captain Ward, it's been a long time. We thought you were lost with the rest of them." Orion's heart leapt. "Colonel Rhea, is that you?" The voice on the other end laughed, though the sound was weary. "Who else would it be? You're not the only one who knows how to survive, Ward. We've been watching your back, but we can't stay hidden forever. You've got to get to us before the Nexus realizes what you're up to." Orion's jaw clenched. He knew Rhea. She had been one of the best human strategists during the Galactic Wars. If anyone knew how to hide and fight in the shadows, it was her. And if she was in the Abyssal Depths, then there were others, more survivors, more warriors who had resisted the Nexus Empire in silence, waiting for their time to strike. "I'm on my way, Colonel. But there's a problem. I've got a hunter on my tail. An elite operative from the Nexus, Azric. He's relentless. He won't stop until I'm dead." The static buzzed for a moment before Rhea's voice returned, sharp and focused. "Azric, huh? We've heard the rumors. He's dangerous, but he's not invincible. Keep him busy, Ward. We'll prepare a safe house for you. The Abyssal Depths is the perfect place to lose him, if you know how to navigate it." Orion felt a flicker of hope. If anyone could help him take the fight to the Nexus, it was Rhea and the last holdouts. "Understood. I'll be there soon. Keep the comms open." With that, the transmission ended, and Orion set his course for the Abyssal Depths, the weight of his mission settling heavily on his shoulders. He had to make it there. Not just for his survival, but for the survival of humanity. Azric's ship emerged from hyperspace just moments after Orion had vanished into the depths. The hunter's presence was a shadow that seemed to follow Orion's every move, even through the complex folds of space. His ship was outfitted with stealth technology, silent, efficient, and deadly. Azric's eyes glinted as he studied the readouts. The human had entered the Abyssal Depths. A fool's choice. The anomalies in that system made it nearly impossible for anyone to survive, let alone escape. But Azric was no ordinary hunter. He could track Orion in places where most would lose themselves. The Nexus Empire had invested too much in him to allow him to fail. The human would die no matter how far he ran. "Prepare for entry," Azric muttered, fingers dancing across the controls. He was no stranger to the abyssal depths. He'd tracked targets through worse. And this time the target was his prey. Orion's stomach twisted as the Vigilant entered the outskirts of the abyssal depths. The ship's sensors struggled to make sense of the chaotic field of gravitational anomalies and dark matter clouds. The navigational charts in his display flickered, showing multiple routes, some too dangerous to risk, others barely passable. But he had no choice. He had to take the risk. "Hold it together," he muttered, tightening his grip on the controls as the ship dipped into a series of violent gravitational eddies. The ship shook, its hull groaning under the strain as the fabric of space bent around him. Time seemed to slow, the stars outside warping into long, jagged streaks as the Vigilant fought to stay on course. As the ship weaved in and out of the gravitational chaos, Orion focused on the comm channel, hoping to maintain contact with Rhea and the last holdouts. But there was no answer. "Come on, come on." Orion's voice was a strained whisper, his eyes flickering nervously between the controls.
He needed them.
He needed to know they were still out there, waiting for him. Just as his heart began to race, the transmission buzzed to life again, static clearing enough for a brief, comforting voice to pierce through.
"Don't slow down, Ward.
You're almost there. The safe house is close. Just one more jump." The relief was enough to push Orion forward. He steadied the ship, guiding it through a final stretch of cosmic turbulence as the abyssal depths threatened to swallow him whole. His body was tense with anticipation, every part of him keyed into the urgency of the situation. Then, through the storm of space, a flicker of light appeared ahead, a sign of safety. The Vigilant broke through the final obstacle, emerging into a pocket of calm space. Ahead lay a small, hidden station, nestled against the backdrop of a giant, dying star. It was the last holdout's sanctuary. Orion exhaled, feeling the weight of the chase, the months of solitude, and the never-ending battle against the Nexus release from his shoulders. But even as he approached the safe haven, he knew one truth that burned through the fog of relief. Azric was still out there, and the real fight was just beginning. Orion Ward's pulse slowed as the Vigilant glided into the orbit of the hidden station. The last holdout sanctuary, a nameless outpost, nestled in the shadow of a dying star, was small, humble, and utterly off the grid. The station had been constructed using salvaged materials from long-lost ships, its exterior battered by time and the harshness of deep space. But it was exactly what Orion needed, a place where humanity could rebuild, regroup, and fight back. He sent a secure signal to the station, requesting permission to dock. The response came swiftly, and soon, a docking bay door opened with a low hiss, the familiar hum of atmosphere regulation systems filling the air. As the Vigilant landed, Orion felt the gravity of his mission return in full force. He had made it this far, but the war was not won yet. The last holdouts were his best chance to organize any semblance of resistance, but Azric was still out there. The Nexus would stop at nothing to extinguish this last flicker of hope. The hatch opened, and Orion stepped out of the Vigilant, his boots meeting the cold, metal floor of the station. The station's corridors were narrow and dimly lit, lined with improvised weapons and equipment. The faint scent of oil and ozone hung in the air. Soldiers in worn-out uniforms moved through the space with purpose, eyes sharp and alert. Orion was met by Colonel Rhea, her figure tall and imposing even in the dim light. Her eyes had the look of someone who had seen countless battles and lived to tell the tale. Rhea gave a tight smile, her voice low and steady. "You made it, Captain. I didn't expect you to get through the abyssal depths alive, let alone with the Vigilant still in one piece." Orion returned the smile, though it was tinged with exhaustion. "Barely. But it's not over. We've got a bigger problem on our hands. Azric is here, hunting me, and the Nexus will be coming after this place soon enough." Rhea's expression hardened. "We're ready for them. This station is more than just a hideout. We've been preparing for this day, the day when the Empire would come looking for us. "You're not alone in this fight, Ward." The captain and the colonel moved through the station, talking in hushed tones as they passed through the makeshift war room, a collection of tactical maps and data terminals scattered across a table. A handful of soldiers, hardened by years of war, stood watch at the edges of the room, their eyes shifting from the maps to Orion, then back again. "The safe house is more secure than it looks," Rhea continued, pointing to the strategic points marked on the map. "We've got underground bunkers, hidden pathways, and emergency escape routes. We know the Empire better than they know us. But we need more than that. We need to hit them where it hurts." Orion nodded, already formulating the plan in his mind. "We'll need every advantage we can get. I've got a few old scores to settle with the Nexus. Starting with Azrak." Meanwhile, deep in the shadow of the dying star, Azrak watched the station from the concealment of a nearby asteroid belt. His ship was cloaked in silence, and the faintest hum of his neural interface was the only sound in the otherwise still cockpit. His cybernetic enhancements allowed him to track the Vigilant S movements from afar, but now he had a new challenge: finding the elusive safehouse hidden among the vast emptiness of the abyssal depths. Azrak's eyes glowed with the intensity of his hunt. His target was close. He could feel it, but this time he would not make the same mistake. He had studied the human warrior's tactics and found his weaknesses. Ward was clever, yes, but Azrak was far more patient. The key to defeating him was not in brute force, but in methodical precision. The hunter's fingers twitched over the controls, sending his ship into a slow orbit around the station's outer perimeter. He would wait until the perfect moment to strike. The last holdouts would not be able to hide forever. Back on the station, Orion was deep in thought as Rhea outlined the plans for their next move. The last holdouts had been organizing for years, building an underground resistance network that stretched across the galaxy's farthest reaches. But now, they needed to go on the offensive. "We've got the tech," Rhea said, her voice firm. "We've got the fighters. But what we don't have is a clear path to victory. We need to hit the Nexus where it matters most, take out their key supply lines, cripple their command structure, and force them to fight on our terms." Orion's eyes were focused on the map, his mind spinning with the possibilities. This would be no easy feat. They were still vastly outnumbered, and the Nexus had resources that could turn the tide in their favor. But humanity had something the Nexus never could understand: the will to survive. "We'll take their fleet," Orion said, his voice resolute. "If we can disrupt their naval superiority, we'll force them to shift their focus. That's when we make our move." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "You think we can pull that off? Against the Nexus Navy?" Orion's lips curled into a wry smile. "If I know anything about the Nexus, it's that they underestimate humans. They've been doing it for years. We'll use their arrogance against them." Outside the station, Azrak had finally pinpointed the source of the signal he had been tracking, the hidden station. His ship, moving in for the kill, was poised for a decisive strike. He had waited long enough. The last human warrior would die today. The air in the station's command center was thick with tension. The last holdouts were preparing for battle. Orion had briefed the key members of the resistance, soldiers, strategists, and engineers, on the plan to strike at the heart of the Nexus fleet. But every word he spoke carried the weight of their survival. If this plan failed, there would be no second chance. As the hours ticked by, Orion found himself staring out at the swirling chaos of the abyssal depths, the gravitational anomalies and dark matter clouds distorting the space beyond the station. It was a hauntingly beautiful sight, but Orion couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in. Something was hunting them. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end, and his instinct screamed at him to move, to act. Without thinking, he turned on his heel and made his way toward the command center's exit. "Rhea," he said as he approached the colonel, who was overseeing the final preparations for the fleet strike. "Something's wrong." Rhea looked up at him, her expression hard. "What do you mean?" Orion didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the screens showing the perimeter around the station. His eyes narrowed. "He's here." Rhea's brow furrowed as she moved toward the console. Azric. Before she could say more, the station's alert system began to blare, its red lights flashing across the walls. The deep hum of a sudden shockwave rattled the entire structure. "The hunter's already here," Orion said, his voice grim. "We have to act now." On the outskirts of the station, Azric's ship slipped silently through the shadows of the asteroid field. His enhanced vision locked onto his target, the Vigilant Star. Orion Ward's ship was docked within the hidden station, its location no longer a secret. The hunter's patience had paid off. With his neural interface working in tandem with the ship's sensors, Azric pinpointed the weak points of the station's defenses. His mind calculated the trajectories of the incoming assault with deadly accuracy. One strike would do the job. One strike would cripple the station. Azric's lips curled into a cold, predatory smile. It was time to finish what he had started. He activated the cloaking system, sending his ship toward the station's outer perimeter. With the power of his neural enhancements, he could see the station's defenses in a way no one else could. The human resistance, while formidable, was no match for him. They were trapped. Back on the station, the crew scrambled to prepare for the attack. Alarms blared through the corridors, and soldiers rushed to their positions. The walls shook with the intensity of distant blasts. Orion stood with Rhea in the command center, watching the chaos unfold. His fingers hovered over the console, calculating their next move. "We need to evacuate the civilians now," Orion barked. "Get them to the underground bunkers. Rhea, you take the command center. I'll hold the outer perimeter with the others. We can't let Azric get inside." Rhea's eyes hardened. "You're not going out there alone, Ward." "I don't have a choice," he replied, already heading toward the docking bay. "Azric wants me. If I stay here, he'll just pick us off one by one. I can lead him away. The rest of you can fight back from the inside." Before Rhea could protest, Orion was already striding through the corridors, his steps echoing in the growing chaos. He could feel Azric closing in, the hunter's presence looming over him like a dark cloud. It was time to end this. Azric's ship emerged from the shadow of an asteroid, cloaking disengaged. The first wave of plasma cannons slammed into the station's outer defenses, sending shockwaves through the structure. The station groaned under the assault, the lights flickering in response to the overwhelming power of the Nexus weapons. Azric's eyes glowed with cold focus as he watched the humans' frantic movements from his ship's sensors. Orion Ward had taken the bait. The hunter's plan was unfolding perfectly. A deep chuckle rumbled from Azric's throat. "Run, little human. Run." He directed his ship toward the station's command center, where the human resistance had made their stand. Azric wasn't here for the station's fighters or soldiers. His mission was clear: Orion Ward. Outside the station, Orion's hand gripped the trigger of an old, reliable pulse rifle as he took up a position near the station's outer perimeter. His pulse quickened, but his mind was clear.
He was ready.
He could feel Azric out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. The first blast hit the outer hull of the station, shaking the ground beneath him. Orion's eyes scanned the surrounding space, the gravity of the situation settling in. He had to stay focused. He had to make sure Azric couldn't get inside. His comm device crackled to life with Rhea's voice. "Ward, do you have eyes on him?" Orion scanned the skies once more. "Not yet, but I know he's out there. We need to hold them off just a little longer." A distant sound, a faint hum at first, reached his ears. It grew louder, sharper. A blip appeared on his radar. It was too close to be anything else. Azric was coming. Orion's heart pounded in his chest, his grip tightening on the rifle. He steadied his breathing, drawing on every ounce of training he had. There would be no more running, no more hiding. This time, they would face the hunter head-on. Azric's ship cut through the station's defenses with surgical precision, his enhanced vision picking out the weakest points in the station's armor. He was nearly there. Orion Ward would be his. But just as he was about to make his final approach, something unexpected happened. A pulse of fire, unpredictable, chaotic, but relentless, struck Azric's ship, rocking it off course. Azric snarled, his fingers tightening on the controls. Someone had managed to get a lucky shot. But Azric wasn't finished.
He wouldn't be stopped.
The station trembled under the relentless assault of Azric's precision fire. The walls vibrated as the echoes of explosions reverberated through the corridors. Orion Ward stood in the outer perimeter, his rifle raised, eyes narrowed, scanning the chaotic expanse of space. Every sense was heightened. He could feel it, the imminent arrival of the hunter. Through the dust and debris, he spotted movement, a glint in the distance. A shimmer of stealth technology, barely perceptible, but there. Azric was approaching, slowly, as if savoring the moment. Orion's muscles tensed, every nerve on edge, but he steadied himself. This was it. No more evasion. It was time to face the hunter head-on. Azric's ship slowly emerged from the cover of an asteroid, its sleek form gliding effortlessly toward the station's outer defenses. A vicious grin spread across his face as his enhanced senses zeroed in on his prey, Orion Ward. The human had done well to survive this long, but survival was a fleeting thing in the face of someone like him. Azric would enjoy this final hunt. As he prepared for the kill, his ship suddenly shuddered, throwing him off balance. His eyes widened as the ship's diagnostic systems flashed warnings of critical damage. He spun the control stick, but it was too late. A direct hit to the hull had triggered an electrical cascade. The ship's systems flickered, forcing him into a hard drift away from the station's orbit. A curse slipped past Azric's lips as he fought to regain control. He wasn't going to let some lucky shot stop him, not now, not after all this. But then the signal came through. His neural interface buzzed, a message from the Nexus Command ship hovering beyond the depths of the abyssal system. A cold, metallic voice crackled over the comm. Azric, return. The primary mission objective is compromised. The station is of no further strategic value. You are to pull back immediately. Azric's grip tightened on the controls. This was no longer just about hunting Orion. The Nexus Empire was ordering him to abandon the mission, and his pride couldn't allow that. He'd come too far. He would finish what he started, no matter the cost. He broke off from the station's defensive line, veering toward a less visible approach, preparing to re-engage. His eyes glinted with cold resolve. The kill would be his. Inside the station, Orion's eyes flicked toward the distant stars. The battle raged around him, but all that mattered now was the moment of truth. He had to buy Rhea and the others time to complete their mission. The fleet strike was still a go. It had to be. If they could cripple the Nexus Navy, they could buy enough time to turn the tide of the war. But that meant staying alive long enough to give them a fighting chance. Suddenly, a soft hum of a cloaking device reverberated through the air, sending a chill through his spine. It was him. Orion's hand tightened around the rifle as he spotted the outline of Azric's ship, just beyond the range of his targeting system. The hunter had arrived. No more hiding. Orion turned to face the approaching threat, knowing full well the odds were against him. Azric was a master of combat, a relentless force of nature, but Orion had something the hunter didn't, a deep, unyielding drive to survive, to fight for the future of humanity. The ground shook beneath him as another wave of plasma blasts impacted nearby. The station's walls groaned, but it held firm, for now. The conflict was reaching its peak. Rhea, Orion's voice crackled over the comm, get the fleet ready. I'll hold him off for as long as I can. Rhea's voice responded, strained but confident. We're almost there, Ward. Just stay alive. Azric's ship came into view, fully decloaked now, its weapons primed. The hunter's eyes flicked over the display. His target was waiting, poised, ready for the inevitable showdown. He was too good a hunter to let his prey escape again. The station loomed in the background, a forgotten relic in space, yet a symbol of humanity's resilience. Azric's lip curled in disdain. His mission had been simple: eliminate the last human warrior, crush their final hope. Yet, As his mind processed the data, he realized that the outcome was far from certain. This was no longer about following orders. This was personal. As his ship adjusted its trajectory, he saw Orion step forward, rifle raised in the open. The human wasn't hiding. There was a fire in those eyes. Azrak had underestimated him before. This time, he wouldn't make that mistake. With a sudden jolt, Azrak's ship surged forward, twin plasma cannons blazing. The blasts hit the ground near Orion, sending him diving to the side. The shockwave rattled his bones, but he recovered quickly, rolling back into cover, rifle ready. "Is that all you've got?" Orion called out, his voice steady even as the smoke from the blasts clouded his vision. Azrak's ship circled back, unleashing a hail of fire. Orion returned fire with his pulse rifle, hitting the ship's energy shields. Sparks flew as the hunter's ship spun, trying to dodge the barrage. Azrak's mind raced as his systems recalibrated. The human was more resourceful than he'd anticipated, but he would not be denied. The hunter's gaze locked onto Orion through the scope of his targeting system. A swift, clean kill. The final moment approached. Orion felt the ground shake again as the enemy ship closed in, plasma cannons primed. This was it. If he didn't take the shot now, he'd be dead. The chance was fleeting, but he trusted his instincts. He steadied his breathing, his finger inching toward the trigger. Just as Azrak's ship locked onto his position, Orion pulled the trigger. A direct hit. Azrak's ship lurched violently as the blast hit the cloaking device and energy conduits. Sparks erupted from the engines, and a massive explosion followed, lighting up the dark sky. Azrak's ship veered off course, tumbling through space, its systems failing. But Azrak wasn't done yet. Even in the face of defeat, he fought to regain control. Orion didn't wait. He sprinted toward the station's command center, pushing his body to the limit. He had to get to Rhea, to the fleet. It wasn't over. Not yet. As the ship's wreckage drifted into the void, Azrak's form disappeared from Orion's view. But the truth was clear. The battle was far from won. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the last human warrior stood ready for the fight ahead.